Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Tlou Energy, also pronounced Tlou Energy. Tlou is the Setswana word for an elephant, Setswana being the local dialect in Botswana. I'm sure it's not often you've heard a presentation, some guy with a big thick Irish accent talking Setswana. Anyway, we're in Botswana. We're doing coal bed methane, listed on the ASX in Australia and on AIM here in London. Currently have sufficient cash in the bank for our current projects, 304 million, 306 million shares on issue. 6 members on our board of directors, 2 based here in the UK, 2 in Australia and 2 in Botswana. I'll just make mention of Tony Gilby. Tony has experience in coal bed methane, or coal seam gas as referred to in Australia, with one of his previous entities, Sunshine Gas. Now Sunshine Gas ended up being sold to Queensland Gas, which in turn was taken over by BG and now Shell for $1.1 billion back in 2008. So Tony was one of the founding members of this company. They went around the world, looked at a number of basins, settled on Botswana as the ideal location from a geological point of view and particularly from a market point of view for a gas to power project. Who are we? Gas to power in Botswana, as I said. The market in that region of the world is enormous for power, not only within Botswana alone, but also in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and so on. So there's a huge demand there. The government is very supportive of the project. They recently had a tender out for a 100 megawatt gas to power project for CBM power that they want to bring into the mix for their generation in the country. Now we've submitted our tender and we're awaiting the results of that, which we're expecting within the next few months. We are, for that first mover advantage, we're the only group in Botswana that have a mining license in place, that have environmental approval in place for CBM development, and that have gas reserves. There's a picture of our map. Up until a number of weeks ago, really, we were an exploration play. So the green and the yellow sections are effectively prospecting or exploration licenses. The blue license, which is about 900 square kilometers, has now been converted to a mining license. So that's the focal point of our project at the moment. We're looking at developing our project right there. We're currently flowing gas in that region. We have reserves booked there. We've contingent resources booked over those 2 areas. Apologies, the setup here, so it's hard to point both sides, but those 2 areas there, the blue and the yellow, is where our contingent resources are. We are at present doing a seismic program in this region here, aimed at expanding our gas reserves in that region in particular. We have a significant amount of data of the coal in that region, and the seismic data followed by core wells that we will drill thereafter are aimed at increasing our gas reserves and contingent resources, plus pinpointing the area where we will commence our development next year. Next slide is just for those who are not familiar with coal bed methane. That's our method of production. We do what we call dual lateral pods. We drill 1 vertical well here. We drill about 800 meters away. We drill 2 separate lateral or horizontal wells, drill into the ground through the coal, and from that coal we produce the gas, which is produced out here, sent to a separator, then sent to the power generation assets. Just a simple graph to show the power demand in the region. 6 gigawatts of power demand in South Africa alone, and just even in Botswana itself, there's 288 megawatts worth of power, and that doesn't include the about 120 megawatts of power they currently generate using diesel. So, significant upside for us to produce gas, based on the fact that Botswana are currently importing power at extremely high prices. Very difficult to get an exact price from the Botswana government, but indications seem to be that they're paying about 40 to 45 cents a kilowatt hour for power, whereas we can produce it for less than half of that. picture from the field. Lesedi in numbers. Lesedi we refer to our area in our main operations area as the Lesedi project. Our total acreage as per that first box is 8,300. Contingent gas resources are only over 1,800 square kilometers of that. So there's huge upside once we get the results from our current operations. Huge upside to expand those resources, and obviously expanding contingent resources and reserves is building up value. The reserves that we actually have, 3P reserves we have at the moment as per box 3 are sufficient for a 100 megawatt project for 30 years. The reason that I have the 100 megawatts is that to tie in with the project that the government have came out with recently. So we already have significant gas in place, and we're looking to get our first stage of that 100 megawatt project up and running by 2019. So a relatively short period of time before we start generating our first revenues. How we got here, effectively started in 2009 as a private enterprise. In 2013 we listed on ASX, 2015 on AIM, and in the last couple of years things have really started to take off. We got our first gas reserves. We've been producing gas in the field for over 18 months now. We're actually producing power from gas. We've replaced our diesel generators in the field with gas-fired generators, so we actually use the gas from our own wells to provide power in the for the equipment on site in Botswana. So effectively it's first gas to power in that region, and recently we've had our mining license granted, which was a key de-risking event, moving us from the exploration and appraisal towards development. I won't go into the environmental approval, but just to say that it was quite a long and involved process of over 2 years. No other group in Botswana have environmental approval in place, so no other groups that are there can actually even do exploration wells, let alone development wells. Potential synergies with CBM. I suppose the key one here is that it is a complement to solar power. There's a lot of interest in doing solar projects, particularly in that region of the world, it being the desert and a lot of sunlight. And we have been approached by a number of groups who've asked if we could be a form of backup power for solar projects as well. Current work streams, as I mentioned, we're doing a seismic program in the field that's almost complete, that program. The results of that will be used to enhance our reserves and contingent resources, and also those results will be used to take account of the best areas that we will focus on for our first phase of our development, which we expect to start next year. So then from that seismic results we will drill a number of core holes, and then in those areas we pinpoint. Once we have the additional reserves and resources, we will then be in a position, we'll be waiting for the response from the government in Botswana to our proposal. We expect to get a reply from them possibly before Christmas, and then post Christmas we would look at sitting down with the government and negotiating a power purchase agreement. Just a slide on the detailing our contingent resources, which I've mentioned earlier on. Our first stage of our development, so I mentioned that the planned development with the government is a 100 megawatt project. The beauty of a project like CBM is that we can do it in an incremental fashion, so we don't actually need to raise all our capex up front. So we're looking at developing the project in a stage process, with the first stage being getting the first 10 megawatts up and running. So that just shows development of the field. Either side of that you'd have your gas wells being drilled, and that's all you're gathering and so on. And effectively you could put in a couple of megawatts, have your transmission line in place, and get your power into the grid. From there, once you've generated your first revenues, you can start plowing those revenues back and sort of add on more megawatts as we go on. Just one thing else I want to highlight is Botswana. We often often talk to people and they think Botswana and they put it in the same bracket as South Africa or Zimbabwe, but it's a completely different beast, to be honest. It's one of the highest credit ratings it's an A-rated country in Southern Africa. It's got its government are very supportive of this type of industry. They've got no black empowerment issues. They've got no foreign exchange controls. Very open to foreign investment. Huge reserves from being one of the largest diamond miners in the world, and their government are really keen on getting new projects up and running to replace potential lost revenues from diamond mining. So in summary, just some technical slides at the end. In summary, we have a large gas asset in one of the best regions in Africa to do business with a very supportive government, and we see a lot of potential upside in the near term. Thank you.
Thank you, Colm.